Penan were the nomads of the Borneo rainforest. They lived here for thousands of years, hunting animals that had magical powers, among trees that were the home of spirits. When their ancestral lands were chopped into exported timber, most of the Penan were starved out of what was left of the forests. And it seemed that the Penan would lose much more than just their land. They would lose their identity, as well as an invaluable store of rainforest knowledge and craft. So what did happen to the Penan? Over the last 20 years, their access to outsiders has been restricted by powerful logging barons and nervous politicians. If the Penan were to become extinct, they were to die quietly. The home of the Penan was the oldest and richest rainforest in the world. But when the loggers came, only the more remote forests and a few national parks had any kind of protection from the firestorm. One of them was Mulu, a barrier of jagged green mountains in Sarawak, the Malaysian part of the island of Borneo. Over 20 years ago, Mulu was a meeting place for two men from very different worlds. Neopun was born into the old ways of the Penan. One day, a large party of strangers set up camp on a nearby river. One of them was British explorer Robin Hanbury Tennyson. The two men became friends, but they hadn't seen each other for 20 years.
I remember when Robin was here. Everything I wanted was in the forest. It was a happy time, but that was before the loggers arrived. Everything is now finished.
It's been a deeper guilt than all the other guilts one feels about being unable to do as much as one would like. And it's always weighed on me, ever since Nyapul and I first met.
In the land they both knew 20 years ago, sunlight rarely penetrated through the thick canopy, and lost worlds sunk deep into the mountains could only be seen from the air. Robin came to Mulu in 1977 to lead the largest expedition ever undertaken by the Royal Geographical Society. 140 scientists made what is still the most detailed study of a tropical rainforest. What they discovered dazzled them. Thousands of plant and animal species new to science, and a network of caves that is by far the largest in the world. Just 2 square kilometers of Mulu contained 23,000 different animal life forms. The park had around 30 million species of insects, and more ant species could be found in a single tree stump than in the whole of the British Isles. But there were people in the forest too. Robin's first encounter with the Penan was with Neopun.
There were these mysterious people called Penan out there somewhere. And one day, after we'd been here about 2 months, this man in a bark loincloth carrying a blowpipe stepped out of the forest when I was almost alone in base camp and walked straight across to me and almost instantly became my best friend. We sort of bonded. It was an extraordinary human relationship. That was Nyapun, and I asked him about his family, and he said they were over there in the forest, and the next morning we went there and met them. And I have always felt very close to Nyapun ever since.
Robin last saw Neopun 20 years ago. He thinks he's still alive, but knows little more than that. The late summer of 1998, and Robin is returning to Mulu for the first time. Since he was last here, He's built a formidable reputation as a campaigner for indigenous peoples around the world. But his most precious memories are of the forest and the people of Mulu.
I'm full of mixed emotions. Obviously, having been away for 20 years since the expedition ended, I'm very nervous about what I'm going to see, very nervous about the changes that are going to be here, and what I will feel about what we achieved and what we failed to achieve.
This time he's come with his wife Luella and 13-year-old son Merlin. With them is Ian Swingland. He was a scientist on the original expedition, but today is one of the world's leading conservation biologists. He's here to make an assessment of the physical state of the rainforest in Mulu. "20 years ago, Ian came here as an expert on lizards, but he found he wasn't always expert enough to catch them. For that he needed the help of Neopun, who adapted his blowpipe skills to knock small flying lizards unconscious, using an inverted dart fired from a range of 30 meters or more. Today, Ian Swingland specializes in raising millions of dollars in international aid for endangered habitats. The small print of a rainforest, the insect and reptile life that teems through the undergrowth, will tell him much about the state of Mulu and what might still be needed to protect it.
Often we try and select those species which are very sensitive to the conditions of a particular place. We can tell the health of a park by just seeing what species are there.
Robin gets his first glimpse of Mulu from an old hillside haunt he discovered during the expedition. It used to be surrounded by forest. Now it's by the airport that brings in the tourists.
This is where we used to come and sit and watch in the evening and look out over pristine forest all the way up to Api, Mulu. There wasn't anything here. Royal Mulu Resort Hotel down there was just the little tiny forest hut. This bank, all virgin, none of these huts, none of these houses, all perfect trees. That's the way we used to walk up to Camp 5, straight through absolutely pristine forest. Now there's a road, and at the end of the road is an airport. So now you can see the edge of the park boundary. It's a clear defined. There's clearance right up to the edge of the park. No buffer zone here. All the logging roads on the hills you can see in the distance. It is very worrying, but Mulu's still a beautiful place. The park itself, in the background, is terrific. It's a wonderful place.
And somewhere in here, he hopes, is Neopun. Robin soon discovers that Neopun is living just a few miles upriver. Finding him so easily may be a bad sign. He remembers how elusive the Penan used to be. The forest was their home and refuge, and if they wanted to be, they'd be invisible to outsiders. Robin was a founder of Survival International. The idea was to try and protect indigenous peoples like the Penan. Although he hasn't seen Neapun in all this time, he's learned what to expect as a witness to the extinction of other tribal cultures.
It was wonderful to find Neapun well, alive, strong, and as instantly affectionate and close and friendly as we always were. We just stepped straight into it the moment I stepped ashore and hugged him. And he is a man of huge dignity and enormous strength, courage, integrity, but he's also a magician. He's also a dreamer and a musician.
Both men now have new families who must be welcomed according to Penan custom. But Robin and Neapun themselves need few formal introductions.
There was no need to reacquaint. We knew each other. We knew exactly. There is an affinity between us, which I don't want to overblow it, because we speak very little of the same language. We both speak rather poor Malay. He speaks much better than I do. But we don't communicate much with words. I know he trusts me, and I would trust my life to him, as I have many times.
It's easier in bare feet. You have to take your shoes off.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Neapun, ha? Bagus. Bagus. There is a picture of Neapun. Yeah. This is Neapun. Yeah? This is him. He hasn't changed. He hasn't changed a bit. Just the same. And here we have the first time we met. Do you remember? You can't see it. Try using my spectacle. Does he use spectacles? Yeah, look. You use this one. Try this. There. Is it better? Ah, yeah? That makes it. Yeah. I will send him spectacles. You must have some. Here's another pair. Yeah. You try, thank you. Try those. See if these are better. So that at least I can be looking. Yeah, those are fine. They're all the same. Two old men with spectacles. Yeah. And is base camp. What it was like before all the forest was cut down. The hotel is here now. It's all cleared. That was our little camp. Remember?
20 years before, Neapun had been Robin's employee for 15 months, although the relationship was always more equal than that.
We had an extraordinary relationship. It was absolutely not master-servant. Yes, I was paying him. That's why he'd come in, because he wanted to earn some money, and he was paid the same as everybody else. But he was just my shadow. I always knew he was there. And everybody else knew that this extraordinary friendship had developed. They don't happen often in life, that two people just know that they are close. It's fascinating to watch his eldest son know, and my son Merlin making friends now. Merlin's been given the name Neapun Kecil by the locals because they knew that Neapun was my great friend, and so Merlin is known as Little Neapun. And that kind of closeness, that kind of trust is very rare, and I feel very responsible towards Neapun because of that.
Living a nomadic existence was never easy. Disease and lack of food were constant threats, and adult life expectancy was lower than 50 years. But Neopun still returns for days and sometimes weeks at a time to the life he knew when Robin was here 20 years ago.
He taught me so much about how to live here, how to live in harmony, how to live at peace with this place, because it's his home, he just knows it, he knows everything about this place. I remember one time, not far from here, when we were just upriver, and we got cut off from the rest of the party who'd gone on ahead, and the river rose and we couldn't get across, and it was evening and it was raining, and I was in a panic because I was going to have a very unpleasant evening. I'd got nothing with me at all, I'd sent it all on ahead. And Neopun just calmed me down and said, just take it easy, sit down, shut up, and stop fussing. And went off, and within moments he built a little house, a little sulap, with palm shelter, keep the rain out, the platform. He went off and killed a mouse deer and brought it back, started cooking it, had some hot soup, and we had a great evening. And I suddenly realized that we just have no idea about how to live properly in relationship with the environment. He does, he knows it all. He taught me a lot. He taught me to feel at peace here.
Neopun's life in the forest ended after Robin's expedition left in 1978. Soon afterwards, he was to have the first of many disastrous encounters with the loggers and the government.
One night we were told we couldn't go to our usual place in the forest. But we are here, we said. We belong here. But the government said it was their land now, or it belonged to another tribe, and they had taken it from them. These people from the government said they now own the land from the mouth of the Melanau River. I told them my ancestors were here, and that should be good enough.
Neopun's ancestral lands had evolved over 180 million years. For a few thousand years, the Penan became part of this ecosystem when they made their homes here. But it took less than 20 years to wipe most of it out permanently. The Penan could never return to their old ways of living. For that, they'd need the forests, and they can't be regenerated. In a rainforest, temperature and sunlight have to be moderated by a protective canopy of trees. Remove the trees, and the temperatures soar. Near the Penan village, Ian Swingland is conducting a simple test of air temperatures inside and a few meters outside the park, where clear felling has destroyed most of the shade.
The temperature is 41, 42 degrees centigrade, even above 42 degrees centigrade in this clear felled area, which has only recently been chopped down. Regeneration in this area will take some considerable time, many hundreds of years, because of the excess temperature and because of many other factors which affect regeneration with this kind of felling. 30 meters away, across the river over there, is the tropical rainforest, which I'm sure will be much, much cooler. Temperature now is 27.1 degrees centigrade, much cooler than across the river in the chopped down part of the rainforest. Much more verdant, virgin tropical rainforest in perfect condition, primary. An example of that is this pill millipede, which can live here, but it can't live on the other side of the river in all that sunshine and heat. So I'm going to let him go now, and he'll probably unroll.
The logging 30 meters away was carried out not by loggers, but out of necessity by the Penan themselves. The nomadic way of life that many of the Penan practiced 20 years ago was to leave them unprepared for what has happened since. Excluded from their ancestral grounds and with food from hunting in sharp decline, they were bound to lose their forest identity. And their skill in shaping weapons from wood or baskets from rattan would have to find other uses. In Neopun's village today, those skills are still used to make trinkets for the visiting tourists. The problem is the tourists are obliged to stop in the village on their way upriver and are not the most willing shoppers. And those that do buy want to haggle, a strange idea to people from a culture which until recently had no concept of money. These tourist beads and baskets are the most reliable source of cash to the Penan. But with few buyers, most of what was laid out that morning is packed away again.
We made so many promises to the Penan about what their future might be like. I feel so guilty about what's happened since we left. I don't know what's gone wrong. I think the Penan had high hopes that if they were going to settle, everything would be better. We tried to warn them that it might not be, but at the same time we had to try and help them to adapt. It's not worked. They're now very poor. They're very destitute. These are nomadic people who should be traveling through the forest all the time. How can they settle? How can the Penan ever settle? The only answer is going to be if they get respect again, if somebody finds a way of recognizing that their knowledge is so important, that the Penan are the most important people.
That night, the Penan in the village lay on a party for Robin. For all that's happened to them in the last 20 years, the Penan here are still a cohesive and friendly community. They have little money, but there's no sign of malnutrition, and none at all of resentment at the destruction that's dumped them here. But only Neopun knows the old Penan dances. Neopun probably carries more of Penan culture in his head than anyone living today, from music and dance to the craft of nomadic living. Now in his mid-60s, he still performs with the agility and grace of a 20-year-old.
The only time I've seen those dances before was the first night when I met Neopun, where I had walked with him after that first meeting to see his family, none of whom had seen a Westerner before, and they danced for me in the firelight that night, and it was very beautiful, and I'll never forget it. We were hugely privileged. I don't know if the others who were there realize quite how important that was. They don't do it for money, they did it for love.
And what they're witnessing is a rare remaining fragment of Penan culture. The only way to find out how well the park has survived is to travel to its deep interior. Heading upriver, Neopun acts as a guide on a journey into the heart of Mulu, to a unique forest of limestone pinnacles. It's an 8-kilometer boat ride, a 7-kilometer walk, and then a 2.5-kilometer climb up a treacherous mountain path. The roughness of the terrain in the park remains its best protection. couple of kilometers from the village and the river shows how unpredictable it can be. The rains have been heavy, but the water levels have dropped several feet overnight, and what were once navigable shallows are now boat-crunching rapids. The only way through is to drag the boat over the rocks.
It's getting quite deep here. I'm going to be getting shallower, if anything. Yeah.
The walk starts earlier than expected. With the boat stranded, Neopun leads the way along an old Penan trail that crisscrosses the river. The hike quickly turns into a jungle obstacle course, and some prove to be better at it than others.
Sometimes it's up down here.
Nearer its source, the river becomes a rush of pristine water, a rare sight on an island where rivers run red with deforested sediment. On the bank, the woodwind section is tuning up. Robin hasn't quite mastered Neopun's nose flute. The final push to the pinnacles will be a 4-hour haul over painfully sharp limestone rocks. The temperature and humidity are so high that the climbers are quickly soaked in a sweat that can't evaporate. Neopun knows enough about the climb to let the British get on with it. Less than a quarter of the way up, and the climb claims its first victim.
Robin?
Yep.
I think it's my lot. I'm going to go and hunt lizards.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye.
Have a nice day.
Once he's cooled down and got his breath back, Ian heads off to do what he's come here for, to search for what he calls indicator species, the clues to the health of the forest.
Indicator species are those species which we can identify as being sensitive to any change in the habitat they're in. And so if we go into a habitat and we don't find those species, something's wrong with the habitat. It's under stress or something's happening to it which is obviously wrong. This particular species could act as one of those. It's called Goniocephalus. It's a nocturnal species, and it's one of the 25 species of lizard that live in this park as far as we know. This animal's not particularly comfortable right at the moment because it's in the sunlight, and normally it would be in deep forest right now. He's green, as you can see. I put him into the forest. He'd be black within about a minute.
The fact that this lizard is still here is one of the first encouraging signs about the state of the park. As Robin and his family get nearer the top, the climb becomes almost vertical. The trail passes straight through a cloud forest which is guarded by ever more dangerous limestone rocks. At the top, the pinnacles are just visible through thick cloud. "15 million years in the making, these limestone needles are one of the wonders of Mulu National Park. But the view from the top is of a landscape much more vulnerable to the logging companies. The destruction of the forest surrounding Mulu might have been halted if the Penan had any kind of political voice. But when they and other tribes tried to stop the loggers, they were quickly brushed aside. Neopun suffered the defeat personally.
When the logging companies left, there was no more forest, and the animals had gone. I'd wanted to talk to the companies, to negotiate with them. I thought we could share the land, so that the companies could get their logs, and we could keep some of the land to make it safe for the animals. But they told me I was wrong. I said everyone has to be somewhere, and we had nowhere. I wanted to make sure there would be a place for my family and descendants, but they said they wanted everything. They were going to log the whole area. That was the reason I was thrown in jail. There was a big dispute. All the Penan people from the villages said the land was theirs, but the government said they had the right to permit logging, because the land really belonged to them. They came to arrest us in a helicopter and a car, and told us we'd be in jail for a month. They let us out after a week and 2 days.
Today, the younger Penan have abandoned the animist beliefs of their elders. In their place is an imported Christian evangelism, which to them may seem their only hope.
These are people we should be bowing down in front of as our masters, our experts, our gurus, and yet they are despised by their neighbors and by their superiors and by their government and by their administrators. And this is the last generation that has that knowledge. And to see the children lost between two worlds because they're discriminated against in the local schools because they are Penan, and so they don't get as good an education in our world as their contemporaries in the longhouses, nor are they learning from their parents the skills and the priceless knowledge of the rainforest. It's tragic to see that. They are the last of a potentially priceless generation.
This was intended to be a model village, with its own school, clinic and communal longhouse. But the longhouse was burned down in suspicious circumstances, and the Penan replaced it with individual shacks on the river bank. The clinic, according to the villagers, offers only minimal medical care, and the schools include nothing on Penan culture. The Penan are becoming a tribe without a past. But what Ian has discovered about Mulu makes him think the Penan are vital to the future of the forest itself.
The park is in reasonable condition. Not much of it's been affected, but we've actually got a problem. The forest is being logged right up to the border of the park. There is no boundary zone. So the park can't actually stay as it is. It now has to be managed rather than just left. If it was unmanaged, the park would increasingly deteriorate. You would get a depletion of species. There has been a disappearance of the larger mammals, which particularly the Penan rely on. Now the Penan can spend 4 times longer than they were spending 20 years ago just to catch a wild boar or a monkey or any other species that they traditionally used to hunt. And that means that the reinforcement of their settling and staying settled is even greater. But as soon as you take human beings out of the forest, there's no one acting as its guardians.
The damage outside the park has not yet affected Deer Cave. This is the biggest cave passage in the world, so big that 5 St. Paul's cathedrals could be built inside it with room to spare. When Robin and the cavers explored here 20 years ago, they found a spectacle that now draws tourists here in their thousands, a huge population of bats clinging to the roof of the cave. Each night is a wildlife carnival. 2 million bats pouring out of the cave in search of food. Returns to his hotel from his forest expedition, full of optimism. He travelled into Mulu fearing the worst, a national park laid to waste. But it hasn't happened yet, and he's more than a little confident he can do something to help protect it.
This place is worth saving. It's the best primary rainforest in the world and has all the components that can either lead to disaster or success. Success must involve the local people. Without the local people, this forest will disappear. If we can develop a way in which the forest can be sustainably used and the local people benefit rather than people in the big cities who often take most of the profit, then we can conserve this park. And over the last 20 years, I have worked in many, many countries solving their problems with the major international agencies. I've been helping the governments restructure the way they conserve. And we can do it here, very much so.
During Ian's stay here, Mulu's 180-room luxury hotel was never even half full. Paradoxically, the hotel's commercial prospects may to some extent depend on the people who could never afford to use it. The hotel's manager, Walter Coley, believes he and the Penan can help each other.
We want to involve the community as much as we can through working with us here as employees. 75% of all our employees are locals. We want to share our knowledge with the community, and we also want to gain knowledge from the community here, who have us a tremendous amount to teach about the rainforest. The Penans are our neighbors. We provide them with help when they are in need or when they have medical emergencies. We can jump in and fly them out to the nearest hospital, etc. This is simply being a good neighbor, because they are a tremendous asset to us. What we want to do is to reach society. The Penan people are from a different time.
For the Penan, time is running out. Dumped at the bottom of the social heap and confronted with a new way of life, they are confused and unhappy. But Neapun holds to one simple belief, that his friend Robin will sort things out.
I have no other plans except for the things that we talked about when you were here last. Of course, there have been so many changes. Now, we are like newborn children because we have nothing. So the hope we have for the future is just to have your help. Whatever way you think you can help us, I accept.
Now, I do have some small help already for you. I'm bringing some money from England, from the Penan Fund, which friends have raised for the education of Penan children. And I'm beginning to see the way towards a long-term, bigger plan.
It's a plan which Robin hopes will give back to Neapun the respect he lost when his forest was destroyed. And, perhaps, it will offer the Penan a future in which their culture survives, as well as the forest itself. The idea is to turn part of the hotel into a kind of rainforest university for the study of both Penan culture and rainforest biology. The Penan would be the teachers again, and resident scientists the students. And one way to make it all work might be to take Mulu out of government hands.
Tremendous future, if only we can help to get it right.
Well, what can one do about it?
Well, in many parts of the world, Indonesia, for example, they've decided to privatize the parks. Privatization means that instead of running it as a state department and subsidizing conservation from state funds, the park actually earns its own living.
But is it naive to start from the point that it's the local people who know this best and who understand it best? Because that's what Mulu was all about.
Absolutely, absolutely. The local people's knowledge of what plants are used for will be the very basis upon which that wealth can be created. If you don't know anything about the plants, you can't do anything with them. But they do. They know what they're used for. They know what species.
In the Penan language, there is no word for goodbye. To the nomadic wanderer, certain words have no meaning. On the day he's leaving Mulu, Robin knows that all of Neapun's hopes go with him.
It was impossible 20 years ago to go without knowing that a huge burden of responsibility rested on us, and one that I couldn't possibly fulfill. And now, having met Neapun again, having seen what's happened, I'm going to have to say goodbye to him again. Here we go again.
Right, Ian. We've had the final hits of agreement from Sarawak.
Good.
I think I'm happy with them. I think we should both sign them now, and I'll fax them back today. I'll tell you a bit more about it.
Okay.
In London a month later, Robin and Ian returned to where their Mulu adventure began over 20 years ago.
Thank you.
They've reached agreement to act as advisors for the Mulu hotel owners who want to try and buy the national park. For Robin, it's his best chance of making good on the promise he's made to Neapun.
Point was well made, I think, that we are not part of the application for the concession on Mulu. We don't want to be compromised by being part of the privatisation.
A couple of days ago, I was in New Zealand.
I will be going back, I hope, regularly to make sure that Neapun and his people do have a future. I have felt deeply guilty for the last 20 years about being unable to help Neapun and to make everything we dreamt of then happen. A lot has gone wrong, but now it's time to start trying to put it right. And the people who matter are Neapun and his people, the Penan.